Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Hersey. Happy Thursday to each of you, and on behalf of the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, welcome to today's webinar titled Building Rapport with Young People from A to Z. This webinar is being made available through a collaboration of the Florida Department of Children and Families and the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. Please note that as an attendee, you are in listen-only mode and are only able to view your name. Your webcam and microphone have been disabled. If you have questions, please send them to all panelists by using the chat panel. The button to open the chat panel is usually located on the upper right side of your monitor. Please use the chat panel to send any questions you may have as you think of them. The presenters will address questions as time permits. Our audio is broadcast through the internet to your computer. If you experience poor computer audio at any time during today's presentation, there are a few options to try using the Communicate menu. For computer audio, click Communicate menu, then click the Audio Connection panel. Click Disconnect, click Communicate menu and Audio Connection again, then click Call in using computer and follow the instructions. If you continue to experience poor audio through your computer, try using the I will call in option under the Communicate menu. The access code and event password are posted in the chat panel. Please note that you must be connected to the audio of this presentation as well as view it on screen to receive a statement of completion. We are unable to verify attendance if you are not connected to WebEx via a computer or mobile device. Therefore, audio-only attendees are not eligible for a statement of completion or CEUs. The recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FATA website within 30 business days. To access the recording and PowerPoint, visit www.fata.org, navigate to the Resource Center, and click on Training Library as shown on the screen. FATA produces many webinars and workshops through the support of the Florida Department of Children and Families. To help participants track credits earned through attendance, we host an online community that provides a personalized digital journal where participants can maintain statements of credit for webinars and workshops taken through the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association. A statement of credit and CEUs for up to 2 continuing education credits are available for participating in today's webinar. CEUs are available for persons licensed through the Board of Nursing, the Board of Clinical Social Work, Marriage and Family Therapy, Mental Health Counseling, and for persons credentialed through the Florida Certification Board. Completing the evaluation is necessary to receive CE credits or to access your statement of credit. Please note that the evaluation will close at the end of the day on Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. At the end of today's webinar, you will have 3 opportunities to complete the evaluation: a link I post in the chat, a follow-up email from WebEx, and an automatic web browser pop-up when I end the webinar. To complete the evaluation, you will first need to register or sign into your account. Please ensure that your name and email address match the name and email you used to register with WebEx. Information you provide FATA as part of registering remains confidential. If you are a licensed healthcare practitioner, be sure to include your Florida license number for reporting to CE Broker when you register with our site for the first time. If you are certified with the Florida Certification Board or licensed outside the state of Florida, you do not need to provide your certification number when you register with our site. If you need assistance with account registration, login information, or accessing the evaluation, fill out a contact form on our website or email training@floridabha.org before July 2nd, 2024. Please note that WebEx monitors the arrival and departure times of attendees and provides a report upon completion of the event. We are not permitted to provide a statement of completion if you do not attend the entire webinar, and we are not permitted to provide partial CE credit. Statements of credit will be posted within 30 business days after the evaluation closes in the professional development section of your FATA account. For licensed practitioners, CEUs will be reported to CE Broker within the same time frame. This presentation is intended solely for educational purposes. The views, opinions, information, and content expressed in the presentation are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Children and Families, the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association, or the Florida Behavioral Health Association. Attendees should note that sessions are recorded and published in various media. Our presenters today will be a panel of Community Coalition Alliance Inc. staff members. Kathleen Roberts, Chief Executive Officer, Elizabeth Nettles, Chief Operating Officer, Laura Holley, Training and Education Director, Nancy Castillo, Program and Outreach Director, and Savannah Rogers, Youth Coordinator. Together, they have a combined experience of over 75 years in behavioral health, public health, and substance use. Now I will turn it over to Kathleen to get us started.
Thank you so much, Robert. And good morning, everybody. We're so excited to be able to be here and share some information with you all. I'm sure many of you have these same struggles that we've had moving along in trying to engage the next generation. And so bringing this information here today will allow us to kind of talk a little bit more about the nuances and characteristics of the next generation coming in to help us in the field that we work in, as well as for those that are at home that are parents or those that are working with young people in other areas. Being able to engage, communicate, and build that rapport is so critical. I want to start off with saying thank you so much to the Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association for allowing us this opportunity, and for the Department of Children and Families for supporting this type of work and being able to share out critical information around behavioral health so that we can continue to grow together as a field and as a community. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome. Today we're here to talk about building rapport with young people from A to Z. I want to start off with sharing a little bit about us. As Robert shared, we are here as a panel to give you a little bit of various perspectives about the young people and the next generation so that we can hear about the foundation around what we're talking about through the research, some data points to share what are some of the concerns that we have when it comes to young people, the things that we need to address, and how do we engage them, and then also the practical side. What are some tips? What are some recommendations? What are some do's and don'ts? To give you a little bit of insight on what some of those things are. So to kick us off, I'll give you a little bit of an overview about who we are and what we do. We are with the Community Coalition Alliance. Our mission here is to serve as a collective voice for our community coalitions and our various partners working together for the health and wellness of all Floridians. We work by bringing together our coalitions as well as various community partners to allow for that opportunity for partnership. They're rural, they're urban, similar and different. This collective opportunity allows us to leverage efforts as well as ideas and opportunities. By bringing everybody together, we're able to really work towards that vision that we have, which is to provide Floridians a healthy and safe environment in which they can thrive. As you can see on your screen here, these are the values that we hold dear to the work that we do, and this is what guides us as we move forward. An alliance, we provide a number of different opportunities here as a collective. We have the membership opportunity, bringing everybody together. We also have the fortune to be able to provide funding and some oversight for different contracts through the managing entity, other federal grants, and opportunities through opioid settlement dollars. We also have been able to offer a variety of different training and technical assistance with the expertise that we have at the table. And we work a lot with partnership engagement to ensure that we're continuing to expand the networks that we have. The more we're all on the same page, working together in the same direction with the same messaging, the better chance we have of creating the community-wide change. We have memberships across our state, both in the Northeast and Southeast, but we really work with partners all across our state. This gives you a listing of the various coalitions and community partners that are a part of our membership body. However, we also work with other groups so that we can continue to have a unified approach to addressing behavioral health in our community. So, here today, we're bringing all of these perspectives to the table. As Robert says, we have over 75 years together of behavioral health expertise. We've come from various different areas. I've worked previously at the state as well as the university. We have on our team also those that have worked at a provider as well as a coalition. We also have those that have worked at the managing entity level. So, with all of us here, we have brought together perspectives that come from state, regional, and local levels, giving you a variety of different insights and expertise, and also our different networks that we've been able to create that also adds to this information. So today we're going to be talking to you about the generation Alpha, Generation Z, and talking a little bit more about some of those nuances that we see. By the time you leave here today, these are the learning objectives we hope you take away. The first being to identify key differences between Generation Z and Alpha. We're going to understand the impact of behavioral health on youth today, understand youth communication styles, and then lastly, we want to make sure we leave with how do we engage Generation Z and Alpha youth. We're going to talk a little bit more about what does it mean when we say Generation Z and Generation Alpha. That's part of their presentation here today. We do have the chat here enabled so that if you have questions along the way, please feel free to add them in there. We'd like to address them. If it's something that we're going to address a little bit later, we will hold off on it. But if it's something we can address right away, we will. We also have added a couple of questions to allow this to be a more interactive opportunity with all of you. The way we learn best is when we have those open dialogues and conversations. So we wanted to have that opportunity here today. We don't want you to just sit and stare at a screen and just hear us talk for the next 2 hours. We want to also make it engaging where we can add in some input and insights that you all have, and then kind of go use that information to move us forward. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you very much for this opportunity. This slide here that you have is a listing out of the various generations that we have. The reasons that we have kind of the descriptions of generations is because generations are impacted by the community, society, various different historical events that take place that help to shape and mold the various mindsets, ideologies, experiences that have an influence as an overall arching influence. Now, of course, individuals vary from one to the other. So we're talking more about that aggregate look of the total population. So yes, there will be exceptions to the rule. Yes, there are some things you're like, well, that doesn't quite fit this person that I know. Probably not. But as a whole, this is the breakdown that we have for generations. And because of the various different experiences that have happened during those periods of time, that has shaped the ways those generations as a whole see, feel, and act in the community setting. So the first one that we have here is the silent generation. So this is our older population that we have. So we're talking about those that are in their 80s into their 90s. Now we have the baby boomers that we've heard a lot over the years of what that generation has gone through, what has happened. And then we have Gen X. So those are the ones that are your middle-aged adults of 44 to 59. Then come in the millennials. It used to be I would hear all the time, oh, that new generation, those millennials. And it's so funny to now be on this and we're like, oh, that new generation. Interesting how things play out over time. Uh, the ones that we're going to talk mostly about here today, though, is going to focus in on Generation Z and Generation Alpha. So these are the two newest generations that we have that are the youth, the children, adolescents, late teens, and young adults. These are the generations that have been very impacted very differently from generations before due to what we've seen in the society, due to technology, due to a number of different things. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail, but we wanted to show you kind of the breakdown on what those ages are. Now, when you look into the research, you sometimes see there's a little bit of like overlap between one year to the other. And that's because there are sometimes that you can fit within two generations. So you can see with Generation Z and Alpha, you'll see Z goes from 1997 to 2012, and then you see Alpha, they're starting in the 2010s. So it's a little bit of an overlap. And that just happens because there's a lot of that transition that happens during those time frames. But we'll go into a little bit more detail about what that is. But this gives you kind of an overall picture of what that means. So, for the first question we want to throw out here today, before we even get started, is for the audience here, please use the chat and chime in. When you think of today's teenagers, what comes to mind? I'm going to give you a moment to go ahead and enter it into the chat, and we can take a look at what are the different responses. All right, so we're getting some information here now. So we have, you think of social media, absolutely. You think of anxiety, you think of COVID. Oh, very good. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in the next few slides. Struggles, confused, technology, definitely. Technology is going to be very key in describing these next two generations that we have because it's really helped to morph what they've been exposed to, learned, and that mindset as well. Resilience. Oh, I love that. So many times we focus on the negatives of these, the stereotypes, but I love to hear the positive side of it. And yes, absolutely resilient from all the things that they've already experienced at such a young age. Again, more social media, addiction to electronics, shy, more attuned to their feelings. Oh, excellent. Social anxiety, gaming, impacts of COVID, social anxiety. Absolutely. So we're starting to see some key themes about anxiety, confusion. We will absolutely talk a little bit more about that as we take a look at some of the data points that we've pulled about our young people here today. Too much screen time, a lot of social media, a lot of gaming, socially conscious. Yes, absolutely. Excellent. Cyberbullying. Oh, yes, that is something that, of course, is new. And this is the next two generations that I've really experienced that. Depression, distracted, anxiety, a lot of anxiety, so lack of social skills. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. These are excellent points, and these are definitely the kinds of things that we were seeing coming up in as we were researching more into these topics. We work a lot with providing presentations to increase awareness and education. So for us, it's very critical to understand the audience. And in order to understand, we have to do a lot of that research and looking at what are the things that resonate, what are the things that trigger, what are the things that seem to make an impact. Locked into social media, entitled, distance from feelings. So we have kind of some mixed uh, communic pieces here. So we have some that are very in tune with feelings and some saying they're distanced from feeling. And that actually is going to play a lot into some of these conversations we'll have on the next few slides. Excellent. Thank you all so much for sharing that. And we'll have a few more questions for you all, but these are great thoughts and inputs. And then we will also use this information as we continue to explore this generation and how to engage in a variety of different settings. So let's talk about the first generation, Generation Z. So Generation Z, we're talking about those that are 12 to 27, somewhere in that range. They are the first generation known as the digital natives. So one out of every five Americans represents a Gen Z individual. Gen Z, kind of the things that are unique to them that are different from the generation before are things like they will choose things like YouTube over websites like millennials. One of the things that's interesting, I remember, growing up as the internet was going like crazy, everything is so accessible information. Anytime somebody wanted some to know about something, they'll say, "Oh, let me Google it." And the responses are, that became a response to how to find information. I'll Google it. What's interesting about this new generation is they don't Google things. They go to YouTube, they go to TikTok. That is where they're getting this information over the way previous generations of searching for things online, or generations before that, which would be going to libraries, finding articles, finding books, finding that resource. This is a generation that's been really influenced a lot by technology. That technology boom that took place during their time of growing up has been huge. Where it came from, I remember as young person, as the internet was really getting into homes everywhere, there were things that were called dial-up you had to wait to get connected to the internet. This generation doesn't know what wait to get connected means because internet access has been a part of everyday world for them since the time that they were born. They're very social and geopolitical landscape focused. They are also very racially diverse from from the previous generations. But you know what is also interesting that they too still are influenced by parents. And we wanted to make I left that there as the last point because so many times we think, oh, there's just so much influence about other things that is what's driving. But we can't forget parents continue to still be influential into their young person's life. And so this is why we wanted to do a presentation like this to give some of those tips and tricks, recommendations, do's and don'ts as we go through, because still, despite all of the influence of technology and everything else, as parents and caregivers and those close to youth still have that influence on them. Generation Z grew up in a time that is so different from previous generations. What they experience is very unique to anything else that many of us have. This is the generation that had, for the first time, the out of school experience with a pandemic. Many of them had those career false starts. There was a lot of instant isolation that took place and a pause on social interactions. And so, if we think back from when to 2020, that wonderful year that I'm sure we all will never forget. We had everything going normal one day, and then the next day, the world stopped. Everything just paused. And in that pause, that young generation in their prime time of socialization and developing and connecting with those around them, that part for them paused also. So they went to school one day, then next day they did not, and they did not for a very long time. That peer connection got disconnected. Those that were finishing school, trying to get ready for careers, that kind of pause for many of them as well. There was a lot of pause in employment. There was also a lot of continued isolation happening. There were a lot of restrictions on in place for employment. Then all of that kind of influenced those key moments in time that matter so much in who we become as we move forward, the things that influence and help us to form our thoughts, ideas, and perspectives. And that really had a big influence. For many of us who are a little older, that it seemed like a short blip in time and we move on because we've had those experiences of connecting. We've had those experiences of, finishing and celebrating milestones in your life through graduations, through proms, through um, leaving high school to college, leaving college to work. Those great moments of time, we can recall and remember those. This generation missed out on many of those opportunities, and that's kind of influenced them. There's been a lot of research to show also that some of the impact of this pandemic timeframe on our younger generations, we won't know the full impact of that for some more years to come because it's so unique and influenced so many key moments in time. For Gen Z, on their thinking of their emotion and social side, what's interesting about this group is that they very much are a socially conscious generation from the beginning. They've watched the world rapidly shift. And I don't mean just pandemic time, I mean like technology wise, connection wise. It used to be so difficult to be able to connect with individuals in places that are far from where they are. Now you can connect with anybody anytime using just your phone. You can FaceTime with someone in a different country and you can get information instantly. So this has really changed a lot, and they've seen this from the front row seats. This is also the generation that feels that they must be on 24 hours a day because everything is right there for them. Everything is constant. Um, they average less than 4 hours a day on apps. This is also the group that's focused on the bigger picture to fight to obtain equality. So it's great to see that there is such a good side of the socially conscious group, But what we also see with this group is that they've experienced so many different things that's influenced their state of being that much of research is showing us that influence on behavioral health and how that is panning out. Some of the research that we found, and we've added links to these, so you'll be able to go back and see where we're getting this information from. But some of the research is showing up to 47% of these Gen Zers often or always feel anxious. And that anxious feeling that has a big influence on a number of different things in their lives and how they handle things and how that can escalate and what that can turn into. So it's important to know as we think about how do we engage these different groups that this is what they're coming to the table with. Also, what we found through this research is that this is a group that is very ambitious, they're very money savvy, they're also that very socially aware group, much more so than the previous generation. Not that other generations did not have that social awareness, because we think about, the times of protests, the 60s, and the various different causes before. It's not to say previous generations did not have that. It's just this group is much more, as a much larger full population thinking this way. Um, 80% of Generation Z tend to buy products that are based on the brand's mission or purpose, not necessarily the item itself. And if you think about it, think about some of the commercials that you're seeing, some of the things that we're hearing about on radio, on the streaming platforms. You wonder sometimes, like, what is this commercial really about? Why are they trying to save a puppy? Why are we bringing tears with watching a commercial and it's about cleaning wipes? It's because they're trying to make that connection. And just as the big business, we as individuals and organizations that work with young people have to do the same thing, is look in and see what is it that makes this group tick. They are very much self aware about so many different social issues, and that matters to them. They are very concerned about life, people, planet. This is also a group that's more diverse, and they're less willing to deal with stereotypes, which is great to know. But we need to know as we go and try to work with them. So brands and companies, they've been able to really capitalize on this understanding of this group. They know that this is the group that's been born very social, virtually. 92% have a digital footprints. Companies align their brands and services with a cause that matters, and that's how they get their attention. Marketeers work on strategies that incorporate platforms that they use. So you started to see commercials and ads and engagement using things like Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, moving away from just commercials on TV. This is the group that we also saw the rise of influencers. So for them, connecting with people has been so powerful that it's led to this impact of people that are not celebrities on TVs for movies or athletes or whatever else. They're just everyday people that have now become connected and become a symbol for them, that they're following them and becoming their own celebrities without having that connection to being a part of a movie or a sports team or whatever other area. This is kind of a little bit of breakdown of things that are keys to influencing. Remembering that this is the generation that have strong beliefs that community should play a central role in tackling the world's problem. Gen Z wants to have an influence, but aren't more so they want to have that impact. They're also inspired by real people in their lives, and that's the piece that is really good for us to know, that influence. And then experts can deliver a trusted, direct to consumer message knowing this information. So these are the things that if the brands and companies selling things have learned this, we need to learn this to be able to better engage them and help and engage so we can have that influence on them as we move forward. So that's a little bit about Gen Z, which are more of our teenagers, early adults. Now let's think about our tweens. So our preteens and also those right before you get to that age. What are the things that come to mind when you think about 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, even 9-year-olds? What are the things that stand out to you when it comes to that population? So we're thinking about those that are late elementary school, middle school timeframe. Okay, excellent. Identity, headstrong. Yes, definitely can see that. Let's see. Okay, social, want to please, peer pressure, trying to fit in, maturing more quickly, trying to grow up fast, stubborn, social anxiety, exposed to media too early, a lot of bullying, trying to find identity, also more socially aware, wanting to be a part of a group, more accepting of differences. Let's see. I see a lot of the trying to fit in. I see a lot of bullying. I see a lot of social media. Okay. Sexual concepts too early, easily influenced, extreme peer pressure. I see the anxieties coming back in for this, poor communication skills, need to be entertained 24/7. That's a good one. We'll talk a little bit more as we go into the next few slides on some of this too. Excellent. Thank you so much. So it seems like many of you also have dealt with this population and with some of the things and the challenges that come up with this. And yes, many of the things that you're saying here, exposure to technology, okay, access to information. Excellent. Thank you so much. This is great information. And these are the things that we have to think about with any population, when you're trying to engage, wanting to think about the things that stand out. You begin first with a list of what are the characteristics, what are the barriers, the challenges, those issues that you think you struggle with that group, and then also what are the positives, what are those things that stand out and support. If you know these things ahead of time, it's much easier to then take the information to tailor it around that, to be able to overcome some of the challenges that you're mentioning here, to be able to really do that engagement. So I'll share a few slides here as we go forward about this group. So with this generation, they're called Generation Alpha. So we started the alphabet over. The last one was Gen Z, which was sometimes also known as the iPad generation, because that was the big introduction here. So Gen Alpha, this is such a unique group because unlike any generation before, this is the first generation that was born completely in the 21st century. And now I don't know if any of you have talked with young youth in this age group when they reference things like, oh, you remember back in the late 1900s. And it just sounds so incredibly long ago and ancient. But to them, it is long ago and ancient, even though for us, it seems like that was like just the other day. I have two kids and they both fit in this generation alpha. So putting this information together has been very eye-opening on a number of different things, and also helps to understand some of the things that I've seen as they've grown and I've seen their friends grow over time. So this group, again, first group born in a new century, they have information at their fingertips from much earlier generation, even earlier than Gen Z. This is the group that also is much more focused on the visual and interactive online experiences in a much earlier age than Gen Z. We say, Gen Z was that first digital native. Well, this generation has been there even from before. This group is one that had, many of them even had their own online profiles and social media accounts even before they were born. Excited parents creating their accounts for them and showcasing them even before they were born, and then being seen growing up online with all the images. So this group, interestingly enough, is also going to have such a huge impact on our society. By 2025, this is the generation that will be the largest generation in history, with over 2 billion people in that generation. That is huge. Um, so here we are, we're already halfway through 2024, and now we're going to be thinking about this time next year, there's going to be 2 billion Generation Alpha young people out in our world. So, very interesting to kind of think about that, which means for those of us that are working in this field and are going to be continue to work and trying to engage schools and after school groups and organizations that work with young people, there's a lot of them that we're going to have to figure out how to engage. So this presentation here today is going to be very helpful for that information. So this generation alpha, we're going to talk a little bit about their social, economic, and tech impacts. They also experience isolation. We talked about Gen Z feeling that isolation and the impact on their key social moments of socialization in life, of those big events like the homecoming, the proms, graduations, those kinds of things. For this group, it's a little bit different. They too experience that isolation and pauses in their times of that social development that is so key and critical for overall development in life. Theirs happened, though, at a much earlier age from the key beginning, where it led to cancellation of playdates, the move, or even the start of school being virtual. This is the group that, for some, I think about my son started kindergarten in 2020. His kindergarten experience is very different than the other experiences like my daughter that's older. There was a very different way that young people were engaged at school. There was a lot of distance, but even before that, the many of the kids that started school had that start and then the stop, and then trying to learn from home and being pushed onto technology even earlier than previous generations, because that was the way that schools could think of to continue to provide the education side, to not completely stop schooling altogether. Now, while we think that there's so much influence of technology, everybody always on them, we also see this very interesting piece happening here at this time where not every home was equipped with the technology of laptops and accessibility. So we have some groups that were overly pushed onto that and others that didn't have as much of that because that was not available in their home. And then now we're bringing them all back together in school and we're seeing kind of that impact happening there. But despite the amount of technology and information access and influence, interest we're seeing in the other data points and our decline in student learning on test scores. So the test scores that they looked at for the fourth grade, those key assessment points are showing lower than the previous generations before, which is then bringing in some very interesting questions on what exactly is happening for this generation. And so with this group, we're also seeing a higher poverty rate than previous generations. In addition to that, we're seeing shorter attention spans. And for those of you that have worked with this population can see how this is having an effect on school with that short attention span. We have to remember this is the group that had access to technology before they could even walk. They've been able to experience a number of different things from those AI instruments like the Siri, the Hey Google, the Echo. Let's see, I just said that and my phone just turned itself on. That's become a normal part of their everyday life where they don't know world without those options and abilities. Um, this is also a group that's lacking some of those social interactions, the skills, because they have been isolated during those key times of really learning that's how to socialize with those around you. And then when they came back to school, it was very distance, everybody on their mats, you had to stay apart. You didn't have as much of that connection like in previous years. And so what we're seeing with that is also higher rates of anxiety and depression for this young population. And that is affecting the way we're seeing some of the data points and what we're seeing for the impact on these young lives. So, what are some of the key characteristics for this group? So, this group is very curious. They want to know things constantly, and they're very quick to jump to whatever is closest around them to look it up. They don't want to go to a book and read about it. They want a quick answer right away. They want to know, but they want to know it instantly. They're also very hyper connected. This is a generation that has been forced through school to then turn all of their schooling to also be online and technology based. Many of the schools where I am now, they've moved where there's not even chalkboards anymore. Everything is a smart board. Students have to do a variety of different online app platforms to complete their requirements for coursework. There's a lot of different things that they're doing that is reliant on the computer. Testing is all on the computer. So they're very connected both in school and then also out of school at home with a variety of different technology things that are available there, including their toys. As you see, many of the toys that have been developed and are coming through are also very tech based and very AI focused, from the animals that move around on command, smart watches, a number of different things. They're very reliant on visuals, way more than text and print. They're also very diverse, but they're also very tech savvy. They've been able to maneuver how to operate phones and tablets before they could even walk. They can move things, close things, find things on there. Even if they don't know how to write, they've learned how to use the microphone option on phones or tablets or speaking to the AI devices to be able to find whatever it is that they're looking for. And they're very quick with it. They pick it up so fast. So, that's a little bit about the two generations that we're talking about and the things that is so influential on who they are and what they do. So we have a question here. What does diverse mean in this context? So when we're saying diverse, this is a group that has much more racially diverse individuals as part of that population than previous generations before. So that's what we mean in this context. So we're going to talk a little bit more about behavioral health. And the reason we bring that up, yes, today we're talking about how do we build rapport, but without the foundation of you understanding what are the things that describe these different groups that you're going to be working with, and without providing you the context of the things that they're struggling with and what they're up against, it's going to be hard to build that rapport. So we're going to give you a little bit about that. I'm not going to spend too much time because not everybody is a big fan of data points. I love them, but not everybody likes to see a bunch of charts and graphs. So I'm just going to use them as kind of the visual to talk through some key points and move us into some the more exciting part, which is okay. So how do we engage with this group? So this visual here just really stands out to me. So when we're talking about mental health in America and mental health here in Florida, it's really important for us to understand what does this mean for our young people. We have so much research that has been coming out about the changes that we're seeing on individuals self-reporting that they're struggling with anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues than ever before. And it could be that we have more access to information and technology that we know about this sooner, but it also could be for the number of different things that have been happening in our world and society, from the pandemic to the evolution of technology expectations and all of those different things. So, looking at this as a visual of all the different states, you can see how much Florida really stands out to many of the other states. Right now, Florida is ranked 40th in the nation for youth who have a mental health or behavioral health condition that's affecting their education. So this is just the things that are impacting their schooling. There's also other points for if we're talking about overall. So we come in 40th. That means 4.7 kids out of every 1,000 in our state are struggling with some kind of a mental health, behavioral health condition that is affecting their school. So it's really important for us to know that, because chances are, as you're engaging with young people, they're probably in that group that you're talking to, you're going to have several of them that have this impact. It's also important that we realize what the adverse childhood experience is, what that means, and how that affects individuals, especially over time. There's been so much more attention that's being brought around this, which is fantastic because we're talking a lot more about it. These are the things that have been seen through the research influencing behavior over time, especially over long periods of time. Individuals that identify four or more ACEs in their lifetime are seen to have a higher risk for some of the negative outcomes. But what's really important here is to not know just about the negatives, but also realize that in addition to the adverse childhood experience, there's also positive childhood experiences. So if we can find and understand more about those positives, using that to influence, we can help to minimize the impact of some of this. These are the things that we're hearing more about, and it's important for us to know that this exists so that we can know what are the things that these young people are bringing to the table. So when we go to the schools, when we work with groups that work with young people, when we engage with groups of individuals, knowing that there are individuals in your group that come to the table with these things is important for you to be able to be sensitive that these may be issues that they're experiencing, and also for you to be able to have those conversations. We now have in our Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey information that gathers this, so we can know what this looks like at our state level and at our county levels, so we can understand really what does this look like for us. What you see here is from that Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey of high school students who have experienced four or more adverse childhood experiences. So we've broken that out by grade level. So they only do this for the high school. They didn't include it for middle school. So you can see there it's quite a bit of percentage, and these are for four or more. So when we look at like 11th grade, it's like 1 in 5 young people is experiencing four or more ACEs. And we also included here over time. Knowing this information helps us to then think, okay, if we know in our groups this is happening, let's come and figure out how do we bring in those positives? How do we help counter? How do we bring in those resources, supports, and how do we have those conversations to keep it moving? This information here, again, I'm not going to go into all the data points and lines of regression or anything like that. I just wanted to show these as visuals because the next few slides are various different data indicators. But one thing that's similar across all of them is that we are seeing that increase. And you can see the line over time, starting here from the 2009, the line going up and up and up. And so this is hospitalization for mental disorders in Florida for young people age 0 to 17. So this is our generation alpha and some of our Gen Z. So as we see over time, that's been going up. And I'll take you to our next slide. This is for students who in the past year did something to purposely hurt themselves without wanting to die. And again, we're seeing that increase over time. Yes, there's been a little bit of a down at one point here, but over time, we're seeing that same pattern of increasing. This is coming from the Florida Youth Tobacco Survey. And so as a statewide sample, we see this is 17.7% of students across our state have self-reported that they purposely hurt themselves without wanting to die, but they purposely hurt themselves. So that is a huge number of young people that we are seeing in our state. This is students who in the past year did something to purposely hurt themselves, broken out by the different racial groups. So you can see what this looks like across that population. And then this is students who in the past year felt sad or hopeless for 2 or more weeks in a row and stopped doing usual activities. This again coming from the Florida Youth Tobacco Survey and also from Mental Health America that has seen the same kind of information. Back in 2016, this was at its lowest point. Here we are now at 17.7%. It's a huge change in a very short amount of time from what we're seeing for our young people. And again, each of these indicators, the thing that's consistent across all of them is that they're all going up. This is youth with major depression issue that did not receive treatment. Across the US, where nearly 60% of youth with major depression did not receive treatment. Asian youth are least likely to receive treatment. And for Florida, we rank 38th in the nation with 62% of our youth having a major depression and not receiving care. That's huge. And it's important for us to know as we're trying to figure out how are we going to engage our young people because we need to. They're struggling, there are issues. Yes, they're bringing in a lot of positives. They are very socially aware. There is definitely resilience, but we need to work on building up that resilience, and we need to work on how to teach those skills and how to engage them where they are. This information here comes from the Florida Youth Substance Abuse Survey. So the question was asked that students who call 988, if they're feeling, would they call 988 if they were feeling overwhelmed or upset? And you can see what this looks like across the different grade levels. You can see for our young sixth graders, so this is Generation Alpha, not even half of them indicated that they would call. So that gives us that important call to say, we need to change this perception that we need to help to empower our young people to reach out if they need help, if they are overwhelmed, if they are upset, or if they are suicidal, to reach out for help and ask. Always ask and help. So we added these data points, not to spend this morning just on data, but to show you kind of this is what we're coming from. And that was more on the behavior, the mental health side, but we're also seeing importance of understanding substance use. So this here provides you some data points across our state for middle and high school students. I won't go through each one of these because we have a lot more exciting slides coming up ahead, but we wanted to make sure you had this information. For us, it's very important that we bring data to the table. Data should drive all the decisions that we make. So if we're at a place where we're trying to decide how to engage, we need to know this information. We need to understand the population that we're working with from the foundation of what has really molded the perception, beliefs, and attitudes, and also what is influencing them currently, and what are those barriers and struggles that they're seeing. And yes, we this all of these slides will be made available to all of you. I see that coming in the chat. Oh, I see we had a question. Uh, so this information was also presented in a book, Coddling the American Mind, as it relates to the rise in self-harm and correlation to increase in social media and tech. Yes, there's definitely a lot of research coming out to see that connection across the technology, the connection social media, across those other behavior concerns that we're seeing from self-harm, the self-report of anxiety, depression, and also with substance use. This slide here gives you information about alcohol. So we continue to see alcohol being the number one substance it's used for individuals that use substances across youth because it's the easiest one to get. It's convenient, it's available in so many different places, and it's available a lot of times at home. What we found from the data is that 6.1% of Florida high school students report one or more occasions of binge drinking. We also see that 11.7% are reported consuming 5 or more drinks per day on the days that they drank, and that 8.4% reported blacking out on one or more occasions. These are really critical data points for us to keep in mind, and also for us to know that as we look at lifetime, we're seeing almost 30% reporting using alcohol in their lifetime, with 11% reporting past 30-day use. Now we added these visuals here for a purpose. So we've always talked about, alcohol being something and underage, accessible to young people, and importance of addressing underage drinking. But what we're seeing also that is going to be for us, what we see as a barrier and challenge as we move forward is the evolution of our alcohol industry that has taken a number of different products to really change its look and feel. That's a lot more enticing for our young people. So when we provide you information that shows you we've got young people that are struggling with mental health issues, anxiety, depression, and other issues, we're showing you that there also are young people that are experimenting with substances. We're sharing out some of the percents of individuals that are saying they have 4 or more ACE scores. Uh, Having this is kind of like that alarm saying these things are coming, which also could be enticing to our young people. And it's being provided in a way where you can't tell the difference between regular alcohol and a normal drink. We specifically wanted to include things like the Dunkin' Donuts Dunkin' Donuts is a huge popular um, group that has a ton of different coffees and donuts, of course, but they've now come out with their own alcohol brand that looks just like their regular um, bottles of coffee drinks. We also have seen Sunny Delight, which Sunny D has been the usually the summer drink for kids and the summer pool time, and now we're seeing that with alcohol. We are seeing the same thing for our Simply drinks, which were always simply cranberry, simply apple, simply orange, fruit drinks. Now those drinks are all coming in with alcohol. And as you'll notice, all of these are being displayed and showed in a way that looks just like your everyday regular coffee and juice drinks. So we're sharing this information just as a heads up, keep this in the back of your mind, keep an eye out for these because as we continue to see, we may start to see some shifts in some of the reported patterns of alcohol consumption based on what the products are that are coming out this year. Um, Here, we wanted to also show about some of the information that we're seeing in the data. We're also seeing some middle schoolers reporting increases for past 30-day use of alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana. Not that, 1 year difference is a huge indicator, but it definitely should be something that we pay attention to. And so we wanted to make sure that you were aware of this and also the differences that we're seeing across across different races as well. So we've given you some background information on what are we talking about when we think of Generation Z and Generation Alpha? What are the things that have influenced them, how they operate, what they think, and some of their emotional pieces, some of the struggles, some of the barriers, and then also the behavioral health concerns. So taking that information, we're going to move us into that next part of our conversation is, so what do we need to know to engage our young generations? And I have Laura Holley joining me here to tell you a little bit more about what that looks like on the practical side and also some great tips. She is a phenomenal speaker and comes with so much great background, is a master resilience trainer. So for those of you that were typing in resiliency, really important. Absolutely. And Laura can tell you all about those pieces as we move into our next few slides. So with that, Laura, I want to kick this part over to you, and I'm going to give you access to the slides. Mm, oops, my camera.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Phenomenal speaker, no pressure, right? Um, but I'm super excited to jump in at this point. You've laid such a wonderful foundation for us to start adding things like what's going on inside their brains, how do they talk? Sometimes if you've talked to a high school student or older middle school student lately, it doesn't sound like they're speaking the same language we are. And in a lot of ways, that's because they aren't, right? So starting with what's going on inside of their brains. I think this is a really important place to start because sometimes we're communicating in ways that are logical and it makes sense for us when we're trying to talk to our young people. And we can't really figure out where that disconnect is. So going back to the fundamentals of brain development is really important. And just having the reminder that not only do children's brains and adolescent brains develop at a different speed, just like their bodies do, but different parts of their brain mature at different rates. And we've heard a lot, you've probably encountered the whole idea that they don't have a prefrontal cortex, no frontal lobe yet, it's not fully developed. But there's more than just that that's going on. There are more implications that that has, right? So there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, and that is fully developed in adolescence. And that is where our fight or flight lives. And that is where our aggression lives. And that is where our spontaneity lives. And our risk taking and our emotions and being able to feel things and our empathy and all of that stuff exists in the amygdala. And the prefrontal cortex is what tempers it. That's our decision making and our filter. It regulates the amygdala. So we have this really developed amygdala and in a teenager or in a young person. And then we have this prefrontal cortex that's just sort of, it's the little engine that could. It's trying, right? And it's not quite there yet. So and when the amygdala starts screaming, it shuts down what little prefrontal cortex that they do have. That's going to help regulate and help introduce logic and sound decision making. And so It's an interesting thing as folks who are working with young people or even as parents to really be strategic and not activating that amygdala. Because the prefrontal cortex is there and it does function. It's just a whisper versus the screaming of the amygdala. So if we can strategize our conversation, be very intentional with the way that we are speaking, and the way that we're presenting information and teaching and training young people, then we can prevent ourselves from really activating that part that's going to go into fight or flight, that's going to suddenly feel like they're in trouble, that's going to start reacting to us with spontaneity and with emotion, and with defensiveness. It comes back to that brain development. Um, this is the reason why when as one example, if you have this great uh, productive conversation with your teenager about getting in the car with somebody who's been drinking, they know the right answer, and they'll tell you, I would never do that, and we mean that. And then in the moment when their friends are going, come on, get in the car, get in the car. And what are you doing? And we're going to be late and we're going to leave you here. That's the part of them that gets in the car and they know better, right? So when certain emotional things enter the equation, their decision making shuts down. And so in our conversations where we're trying to talk to them about things like substance misuse or their mental health or making good decisions, we have to approach that in a way that's not going to activate that fight or flight, or it's not going to get through, right? It's not all bad news. The good news is, especially the teenage brain, as they get a little bit older, it's really ready to learn and adapt. It's they're looking for that, right? And even though we can't make our brains grow any more than we can make our bodies grow, it's also something we can work out like any muscle. So if we have kids in challenging classes, if they're exercising, if they're engaging in creative activities, that can strengthen brain circuits and that can help the brain on its quest for maturity. The teenage brain is like a sponge, but you got to be careful what you're soaking it in, right? And so we be careful not to activate the amygdala. And we'll cover some tips and tricks in the next slides that are coming up. Savannah, our youth coordinator, is going to jump in a little bit and talk to you about how to craft some of those conversations, not activating the wrong parts of their brain and it's getting. The other thing that's important is to move away from telling, and get into training and development. It's very easy for us to, as adults, tell our children what is right and wrong, what is acceptable or unacceptable. Um, but providing guidance helps them make their own decisions. When they make their own decisions based on the information you've given them, it vastly increases their probability of them owning that, becoming a lifelong either value system or behavior, and having those boundaries that are their own. Telling and lecturing eventually does fall on deaf ears. They learn a whole lot about what you think and feel, but they don't learn a lot about what they think and feel, when we are just simply giving them the right, the wrong, the do's, the don'ts. Training and allowing them to make decisions, really a better way to approach, right? There's some things that are going on. Kathleen mentioned about the influence of parents, and that is absolutely so accurate. And I think it bears repeating over and over again every time we talk about teenagers and what their worlds look like, because it looks more and more like parents don't have influence and they have so much influence, but it's not the only. And so there is this desire to fit in and to avoid rejection and to have social acceptance. And because their job in adolescence and beyond is to form their own identity, to separate from you, to eventually launch an adult life, that doesn't happen overnight. So that's happening over the course of adolescence. There becomes this self-imposed peer pressure. Peer pressure exists when peers are actually applying pressure to one another, and then it exists even in the absence of their peers applying pressure in a moment. It's a self-imposed pressure to fit in, when they develop what is cool and what is going to make me fit in. They come up with those ideas, then they're going to do those things regardless of what anybody else is giving them, right? So even with exceptional parents, a healthy home life, young people are still susceptible to peer pressure from the outside and from within themselves. There's also hormonal inconsistencies, right? Emotional centers, regulations of the brain, all of that stuff's happening. And puberty can begin as young as 9. And so when we are looking at those hormonal inconsistencies, they're happening, there's a huge time for which that is. And then there's personal, social confusion and anxiety. Anxieties come up a lot, right? That was something you guys thought of on a whole. Really, we saw that over and over in the chat. And then we talked about their exposure globally and all of those things. That's the social experience, sort of what is happening in their world, right? And then when we're talking about Gen Alpha, right? I'm not going to say these words out loud because I have one of these devices sitting right over there, right? But smart home device, and then she'll just start talking at me. But smart home devices, when we just walk into our homes and say things out into the air, right? Or say things into our phones and it starts back. They've been using artificial intelligence almost their entire lives. Gen Alpha doesn't really know a time when we didn't have those things. They're consistently connected to Wi-Fi, right? Some folks from my generation, we need Wi-Fi if we're going to intentionally go on the internet. We need Wi-Fi for the things they carry to simply work. Sometimes they need it to do their, and they're not going on the traditional internet necessarily, but it's all these Wi-Fi connected devices. Everything's globally connected. Technology in schools. I have a high school student. I don't think had a single physical textbook. Dual enrolled in college, any physical textbook for her college classes for. And there's constantly like new, oh, well, this app or this website, or we're using this, or we're taking our test here, or we're having a study group on this platform. Everything is technologically connected. They're very accustomed to interactive multimedia models, social media influencers, right? They're not all created equal. There's some positive influencers out there. There's some giving them the wrong information. There's some that are really popular, and as adults, you'll look at it and go, "Why?" But they're very, very influenced by that. They play games. Gaming gets a bad rap, but there's a lot of games out there where they can build and create and design, and some of that in moderation, is helpful. Some of it is not, but it's definitely impacting. And their screen time average is about 5 hours a day. And I think what's interesting is if you talk to a young person, if you've ever, got a lot of people on here, so I'm sure there's some parents of teenagers on here. And if you monitor screen time like I do, you might go like, well, let me see your screen time. And the answer is never just a number when I say how much screen time did you have. It's 6, but that includes when I listened to music, and that was also the study group that I did. So she'll drill it down and say it was really like 3, right? So it's so easy to get into this black and white. Like as a Gen X, it's very easy for me to get in this black and white place where I say screen time is screen time and that's all bad. Right? But so much of their life is happening virtually and digitally, and not all of it's bad. So looking at how much time they're spending and on what is an important thing. They sure do speak differently. There's slang, and every generation has slang, right? But this slang is very abbreviated. Is the best way I can describe it because of their technology. Oh, I did not advance this slide. Okay. So this slang is very abbreviated, and it's very driven by it's very driven by the technology that they are saturated. Social media acronyms, slang, online gaming terms, emojis. Emojis are their own form of communication. You can have a conversation entirely in emojis. And shortened text. Everything's very short. The age of hashtags, the age of quick texting, those sorts of things. So what does some of that look like? This is such an interesting slide, and I want to talk about this for a minute. What we're seeing here, and I'm going to go through some of these, and again, every generation has slang. And there's slang words from every generation that endure. That, there's words that came in the 60s and the 70s even that we still use today. And parents in the 60s and the 70s didn't understand what those words meant, and now they're very commonplace. So here we have a list of a lot of the ones that maybe hit the landscape a couple of years ago and have endured. But as adults, you might not know what they are. Basic is exactly what it sounds like, right? That's just that sort of that mainstream. Sometimes that's an insult, sometimes it's not. It's evolved a little bit. Fringe, there's where we start to see the shortened version of what cringy, right? You start to see that. The Lulu is always super fun. Gucci means good or cool. Ghost is one that will likely endure. That's endured for a long time. That's when someone just simply disappears from your life, especially online. You'll hear phrases related to that, like they left me on red, they left me on delivered. That's when somebody texts you and you can see that they got it, you can see that they read it and they didn't answer you. Slay is a big one, and then like we're seeing things like sus where it's shortened, and we're seeing these kinds. Really important to know what our kids are talking about. There's a few that entered the scene over the past year or so, and whether they endure or not are remain to be seen. But you'll hear a lot of particularly Gen Zs using the term she ate that, he ate that, I ate that up. I've even heard ate it up and left no crumbs, right? Meaning somebody did an amazing job at something. That slaps is another one, meaning that's so good, that's so great, that slaps. Riz is a fun one if you haven't heard it. It's short for charisma. This is where we're seeing the short. And it's kind of like in my generation when we would say somebody has game, right? They're good with the ladies or the gentlemen, right? They have Riz. So that's one. Locked in is when we're getting really focused on something. A lot of Gen Zs are using the term locked in. Sigma is something that it means a social leader. I saw one in there. Somebody put cap. Cap is not so much used anymore, at least in high school. Middle school, you hear a lot of cap. Cap means a lie. So, and you'll also hear no cap, meaning no lie, right? Sigma means social leader. And it's used often like to tell somebody they're not a social. What the Sigma is the phrase that you might hear, and that means you are not a leader. Low key means I'm not going to make a big deal of it. Like I low key like that. I low key like him. I low key like her. I'm low key stressed out about that. You'll hear that phrase a lot. Fit is short for outfit. And then one that's newer that you might hear, and the reason I'm bringing this one up is because of something we're going to talk about on the next slide. It's called mewing, and you might see kids go like this, and to each other, or online they might go like that, and it's tongue placement inside your jaw that is supposed to give a really nice angle for like all mewing. The reason I bring that up is because I want to skip up to don't jump to conclusions. First time I heard mewing, I thought that that was terminology that was not okay. I said, what are you talking about? I didn't know if it was substance related. I didn't know if it was sexually related. What do you mean she's mewing? What is mewing, right? So making sure that we don't jump to conclusions about what we hear our kids saying is really important. It could be simply said. And a lot of these terms, you're going to hear so many more than even this, right? A lot of the ways in which I know, like Kathleen and I both have young daughters, we both talk to our daughters to get this information. Tell me what you guys are saying. Tell me what that means. Some of this stuff, unfortunately, by the time you Google it or look for an official list, some of it's not even cool anymore, right? So in order to really stay on top of what you're doing, we have and ones that will continue to tell us the truth. So that's also the challenge, right? Knowing how they communicate is super important so that we can communicate with them, not so that we can communicate like them. That's important, right? We don't want to try to fit in. We're not 16. It's okay. It's not going to make us more cool to use more slang terms, particularly in the professional setting. We want to make sure we stay professional, and we want to make sure we stay authentic. If it's not a word that we use, we don't need to start using it. But we do need to know what they're saying. That's going to make us more effective to listen and know how they feel about things. Show interest, right? Ask them, encourage dialogue. It can be fun sometimes even just to laugh about like, what? Why do you guys say that? What does that mean? And to really increase our understanding too, right? And engaging them as well is important. Their online influence, right? Their identity is shaped by likes, comments, followers. That stuff is very important to them, and it does really resonate in terms of their popularity, in terms of how many people are liking what they're doing. Sometimes it's even how quickly they're getting likes, or they've carefully curated this post and it didn't get anything for a while. Like those are things. It's so easy for us folks who are from a generation that didn't grow up with this in our adolescence to sort of dismiss it and say, well, that's not real because that's online. And we forget that for them, social media is very, it is where they hang out. It's just hard for us to understand that it is the same um, it is the same as when we would go. And so the way people are responding to them in their spaces are very important. Filters, hashtags, that's all ways that they find information and connect with each other. And then forums, right? Gaming's other interests with like-minded people. And the things that they belong to, the spaces they belong to online, help shape their identity. I am loving the chat, by the way. I'm not sure that I can even go back and see all of it, but everyone's adding their oh yeah, I'm seeing goat tea, like spill the tea. I mean, we could literally spend like a 30-minute webinar just unpacking slang of Gen Z and Gen Alpha and still not get it all right. But everything you guys are adding, oh my gosh, is so great. So keep throwing those in there for sure. And that's so great. Okay, so online communication, right? They communicate constantly in a virtual way, right? And they communicate with images, videos. The Generation Alpha in particular is very much in images, image sharing, video sharing, even when they're making phone calls. Like when I was growing up, I'm going to call so and so. I mean, technically, I guess that's not a good example because we didn't have the video calls, but even now, like I have FaceTime, but if I'm going to call a friend, I call them, right? It's a regular phone call. When teenagers say, I'm going to call so and so, it's and voice memos and sending videos, those are all their primary, the way that we view phone calls. The YouTube sensations, right? YouTube, Kathleen mentioned before that that's really a go-to place to get information. And there's where we find the cool stuff that we want to buy or be a part of or do or try. And then so much, again, those AI tools that are everywhere, smartwatches, all of those smart home things. And we use all that stuff too. And I bring that up to say, like, sometimes it's so easy for us to judge the younger generation because we see the negative impacts that some of this overconnection has. And yet I have a Ring doorbell and a smart thermostat. And, so like we're also using these AI tools and these communicative tools. We're just using them in different ways. I am loving the chat. It's still blowing up with Gen Z terminology. I've seen period. I've seen bro, bruh. I've seen it's giving, all of that. You guys are so spot on it and I love it. We're also seeing gaming options with online communication. Sometimes this is tough because it is exposure to strangers. That's a whole other topic to get into. So, but they are communicating with a lot of people, particularly in gaming online. So know that is happening in the gaming world. So if we're looking, sometimes we look at some of our younger folks in like the Gen Alpha, and we think, oh well, they're into this game and that's okay and it's great and it's healthy and it's not bad, and they're not on social media yet because there's so many dangers there, but they're still connecting with strangers and they're able to communicate. So paying attention to what features we have on all these places where they live is important. So this is super fun. This is a Brandwatch provided some data for the top 5 most frequently used emojis per generation. Baby boomers are using this one, right? Gen X is using a heart. I'll own that. I do use a heart a lot. Although I do use the millennial one as well, which is the laughing emoji. Gen Z uses the crying emoji the most. And you see just some of them show up on different places on the same list. See, the crying emoji shows up on a few of those lists, but this is an interesting. And then they start to mean different things for different generations, and that's a whole can of worms. So One of the things we also need to pay attention to is the texting shorthand. And again, very much like slang, we could go on all day. Some things right off the top of my head that are not on this list are, HMU, hit me up, IDC, which means I don't care, IYKYK, which is if you know, you know, BRB, be right back, right? And that's just off the top of my head, the things that are missing on here. But this is a great example of some of the lesser known ones, right? RQ, real quick, WYA, where you at? Those are things that, but those shorthands will show up. And it's important that we know what they mean. If we see one that we don't know what they mean, ask, find out what those things mean, or look them up. Okay, so that's going to be an important. Okay, so let me ask you, what are some challenges or barriers that you have encountered with engaging this generation? And that either, like, let's keep it, let's say Gen Alpha, because that's, let's say like well, we'll do the mix, we'll do the overlap. Let's say high school. What are the challenges you've had with engaging? We'll keep it specific since we're talking about such a long. I think language is just one barrier, but I think there's a lot, right? Yeah, language is huge, right? I'm seeing that the internet, attitude, right? Some of the attitude could come from like what part of the brain that we are. Attention, we're going to talk about that. Absolutely. I'm fine, right? Kind of should they think they understand everything. Oh, I love this. Attention span, we're going to talk about. They think they understand everything. It's sort of the shadow side to being so globally connected. They have access to so much information that they think they know everything, right? Or at least that's how it comes across. Yep, and because of access, mood changes, sure, yep, mood, absolutely, right? So they show, oh, I love that. Faith put in there, they show respect very differently than other generations. And that is a really interesting observation. And I love, Faith, and appreciate that you didn't automatically say they were disrespectful, even though it might be, and some might be, or it might be perceived as disrespect, or whether it was intended as not, but it's just that they show respect differently. And I think that's really interesting. So yeah, this idea, Jennifer added this idea that you have to respect me first, which is very different from the value system of previous generations where respect was given, and not necessarily earned when there was the power dynamic of parent-child, as an example, or adult young person. And so that's just a very interesting approach. And we're seeing some of the things we saw when we said, what do we think about teenagers early on? We're seeing some folks who are feeling behaviors of entitlement and things like that, argumentative, that are showing up, right? So lots of barriers. Thank you for being so open with sharing those. Short attention spans. You guys just said that in the chat, right? They have shorter attention spans. And so our information has to be concise. It has to be quick. We have to, if we're going to be the most effective, we want to start with the headline. This is what we're talking about. Now let's talk about it, versus taking you down a rabbit trail. Hands-on activities are really important, and interaction. That is really important as well. Their attention span is not going to withstand a whole lot of exposition, a whole lot of instruction before they really get their hands on the play. So learning by doing, even if they make mistakes, is a really good way to engage Gen Alpha. Lean into what they value, and that will help with this last one, which is build on their curiosity, and allowing them to make decisions, again, even if they fail, and then learning from that failure is going to be a lot more effective with this, right? As a parent, I wanted to include this because this is something that is very important to me as a parent, and I wanted to not let this opportunity pass by without sharing this. There is I call this being an askable adult. And so this isn't just for parents, but I think it's really relevant to parents. But being an askable adult, if you want to be the person that has the opportunity to guide, to weigh in, to be an influencer in their lives, it starts way before the conversation you're trying to have in that moment. Being available is number one, right? Again, some of this, it taps into what you guys just said in the chat, about respect being earned and, thinking they know everything. So in a way, you need to earn permission to discuss the hard things in a credible way. And we may have feelings about that, and that's okay, but it just is what it is with this generation. And how we do that is to engage with them often about even the things you don't care about. And that sounds harsh, but it's real. I don't care about everything that's happening in the social landscape of the school my daughter goes to, but I listen to all of it and I feign interest so that when I need to talk to her about the real stuff, I'm engaged with her life. So really being available and earning that permission. Being a role model, right? If and this one's, what you do matters a lot more than what you say. And this can get dicey in the substance space because if you're a legal adult engaging in legal adult activities responsibly, for somebody with an underdeveloped brain, that could be a mixed message. And so one way to really combat that is to discuss them out loud. You're at dinner with your family and, discuss out loud, make the decision out loud to not get the second glass of wine because you have an early morning the next, right? Model responsible behavior, even when you might be doing legal adult activities of it. Also, it be self-reflective, be critical. If you make mistakes, and I'm not talking about in the substance space, just in life in general, own them, say them, right? Even when they're not related to the topics you want to talk to your kids about and you really want to be an influencer about with their lives, just that general knowledge that you are somebody who admits mistakes, that you are self-reflective, that you are critical, that you are a role model, that you do what you say you're going to do, right? That all lays that foundation for being an askable. We want to lead with lack of judgment in other places. So much harder than it sounds. But basically, it means we can't die on every hill, right? If they think that if you want them to share, you have to be able to hear, recognize what's hurting them and what's not. And build a reputation for an adult who holds a hard line when it comes to health and safety versus holding a hard line on absolutely everything that deviates from a social, right? So we want to make sure that we are discerning so that when we say, this is a boundary and this I feel strongly about, that's not what you're saying about everything in their gender. So lacking judgment in other spaces that aren't harming them really helps you be able to, draw some hard lines in the sand when you really need to. We don't want our wisdom and our views on substances and things like that to get sort of lost in the whole noise of generational. We have to be careful with that. Also, if we're wanting to talk to our kids about substances and we want them to talk to us about substances, bring up the topic frequently. Share news stories, share things from work, share about your old classmate you saw on Facebook, right? Share. Don't limit your substance conversations to asking them if they're using and telling them not. Only time you're talking about substances, you're going to start to sound like an adult from the Peanuts cartoons really quick. Want, right? We've got to make sure that it's normal to discuss these things in our households and in our spaces in a certain way that's consistent. And when we do these 4 things effectively, we really increase the likelihood that when something is happening in their world that we don't know about, they're going to bring it to us and see how we feel about it and bounce it off of us and talk to us about those things. And that's really important. Now, when we're talking about really young, like the Gen Alphas and really young, we can still lay the foundation to discuss substances in ways that are really age appropriate. One of the best ways I have seen this is when we just start to talk about the impact that medication has on us and just let that marinate, right? Have you ever taken medication when you're sick? Did it make you feel better? Great. It changed you, and that was a good thing. You were sick, you needed to be changed. What do you think would happen if you took medication when you weren't sick? The answer being it would still change you, right? But that's not a good thing because you didn't need it. Medication will change you every time you take it. It's important to only take it when you're sick. These are the conversations to have with much younger people. Discuss who should be giving them medication and who shouldn't, right? Should our friends ever give us medication? What if they're sick and they had the same thing last week and it made them better and they have extra? right? Discuss that not all medication sharing attempts come from somebody wanting to hurt you. Sometimes people think they're helping, so you have to be the one that has the boundary to say, I just don't take medication unless it's an identified trusted adult that I've talked to. We should know who should give us medication, that's a very young skill that we can put into place. Introducing the word drugs is good, right? Medications sometimes called drugs, which is accurate, but the word drugs also is used to describe substances that aren't medications that people also take to get. And those are usually against the law, even ones that aren't have rules about who can take them, and they're harmful to children. Real basic foundational stuff that we can build on when they get older. Talking about how some drugs look like candy. They can look like sugar, herbs from the kitchen, rock candy, mints. Sometimes they look like gummies. Sometimes they're in fun shapes and colors like Skittles and gummy worms and gummy bears, so that we can really enforce that idea that because of that, it's real important not to take any candy or treats that you don't see the original package. They're not from somebody who you should be taking candy or treats from, and you don't see the original package. We also want to teach them, Kathleen touched on all the products. So it's real important. A complement to that is when they are young, them the words that mean substances. Twisted, spiked, right? Teach them that those words mean that is something that is not for kids and that can be right. We want to make sure that we do that. And then make sure they know what to do, where to go to, when and if that they ever need help, and guide them with coming up with a plan for how they how they will handle being offered treats from because they might be, and it's not nefarious. I had that situation when my daughter was young. We had really clear boundaries in place, and then there was somebody she interacted with that was originally from Korea, and they had gone back for a trip, and they had brought back treats. And in her lunchbox, there was just a little zippy bag, and it had treats in it that, of course, my daughter had never seen before. And her friend very excitedly offered her one. She knew how to decline that. It wasn't nefarious, but she knew that was something she shouldn't be eating because she didn't know what it was. She couldn't see the original package. And we had a plan in place for the language that we can use, right? And how we can communicate with our friends. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Savannah, who is here. Savannah, if you can hop on. She is our youth coordinator, and she is going to talk to you about kind of the nuts and bolts about having these conversations.
Thank you, Laura.
I'm going to try to figure out how to give this to you.
Yeah.
I can't find it here though. There we go. I think I have turned it over to you now. You should be able to drive. And I'm here if you need me.
Yes. So thank you so much. Good almost afternoon, everybody. I am Savannah Rogers, the youth coordinator for CCA. So my part of this presentation is going to be starting the conversation, right? So moving into the teen and preteen years can be a challenging yet crucial phase for both parents and their children, as we know, right? Choosing the right time and place for important conversations is essential to ensure that it's effective and meaningful conversations that we're having. For many parents, the car can serve as an ideal location to provide a captive audience and a limited distractions. Dinner, having that conversation at the dinner table, whether it be at home or out that night, is also another excellent setting that you can request the phones to be put down, a way to encourage focus and have that face-to-face conversation. Having that plan for the conversation is also important. We need to remember that. It is equally vital to be flexible and to be ready to pivot at any time as the discussion unfolds. Let your teen or preteen know when you're why you're initiating this conversation with them. Whether it's because you took the workshop like this one, right? Reading an article or a podcast, or had a concerning rumor come up that you were like, let me just talk to my child about this real quick. Explain your motivation helps build that trust and shows that your intentions are rooted and you are concerned and you care, right? When engaging in these discussions, it's also to remember it's essential to pick your battles wisely. Language and attitude, like we've seen in the previous slides, right? All language is different. I'll be honest with you, I'm a millennial, so it's seeing the Gen Z is sometimes I'm kind of like, what does that mean? And I have to, go to TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or wherever it is to find out what they're talking about. Um, so using that, they could use slang that you're like, I really am not sure what that means, or even the occasional eye roll. We know that, but that may surface. But it's important to remember that the conversation stakes are high, and that the minor distractions are, just a thing. With that, focusing on the bigger picture and the core issues at hand will help you ensure that the discussion remains productive, positive, fostering a stronger relationship and better mutually understanding. So we're going to move on to the next slide. So in the chat, drop how is today's teens or young adult different? I know we talked about kind of this a little bit, but give me a little bit more. How is today's teenagers or young adults different than your generation? We've got some coming in. That's good. While those are going in the chat, I just want to remind that one significant difference in this relationship is technology, of course. The generation often refers as the digital natives. They have grown up with access to information and social media on a daily basis, right? Where to the point they're having to be it on 24/7, that kind of thing. They consist connecting with communication styles, learning habits such as schools, and even self-perception. All right. So Gen Z communication styles. We want to be consist but informal, right? We want to have that text format and those visual communication images or videos. Like Laura talked in some of her slides, they have a short attention span and they're a sponge. That age group is definitely a sponge that we have to give them the correct information. But with that, we want to remember that one way to communicate is in person and in value, inclusion, transparent, constant feedback. Having that in person, face to face is hard, and we understand that, but at the same time, gives great feedback and inclusion and everything we were looking for. All right, so moving on. Effective communication with preteens and teens can be challenging yet rewarding, as we all know. As its age group experience significant physical, emotional change, social change, empowering thoughtful communication strategies is essential, right? This is a tough year or age group, I guess you could say, because they're really trying to learn themselves, learn who they are, that kind of thing. So let's unpack these 5 strategies. All right. So our first one is going to be open and ended conversations or questions. Sorry. The effective approach to a open and ended conversation, instead of asking questions to be answered with a simple yes or no, pose questions that are more elaborate responses. For example, instead of asking how was your day at school, because we all ask our kids that, you might ask what's the highlight of your day. And I saw in the chat earlier somebody asked their kids what's their highs and what's their lows for the day, and I love that. Giving them more opportunity to have that conversation. This encourages them to show more about their experiences, feelings, fostering deeper conversations that we need to have with these kids. Also, remember that every question doesn't need an answer. Be comfortable with that awkward silence. It may come to it. And being comfortable leaving something as a question, phrasing it out like it's something to give thought to, or even I'd like you to consider that without pressing the answer right away if they don't know. So moving on to reflective listening. Reflective listening is also another powerful tool. This involves active listening to what preteens and teens is saying and then reflecting on what you heard in your own words. This is not only shows you that the general interest in their thoughts, but also helps clarify any misunderstandings. For instance, if they express frustration about a school project, you could respond to, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed about your schoolwork. What is there a part particularly that is challenging for you? Giving this demonstration empathize and provides them with opportunity to elaborate on their concerns. Giving that conversation, having that conversation with you, and not just having that yes or no answer, right? Or that short-term answers. Moving on, focus on the facts. Focusing on facts rather than the emotions can help in discussion about sensitive topics. Instead of reacting emotionally, try to keep the conversation grounded in reality. Addressing a topic of fentanyl, it's a hard one. Like Laura said, we have to have those hard topics in those conversations. Can be so addressing the topic of fentanyl, sorry, without resorting to scare tactics. We know, like I said, I was a millennial. So the just say no and don't do drugs was definitely up my, alley, but it was a scare tactic for us. It was something we remember, but it was like, what really came out of that? Balancing is crucial to approach in honest and empathy. Let them know that fentanyl is a powerful opioid that is prescribed to severe pain management, often in cases involving cancer patients. However, its potency, which is about 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, but has also led to a surge in illicit manufacturing and use and contributing to significant public health crisis that we have going on in our world right now. The reality of fentanyl impact is stark, but presenting the facts and being clear in your conversation often supports the fostering understanding and encouraging safe behaviors. So moving on to discuss the norms. When discussing substance use, the older kids, it's more important to acknowledge and address the common message they receive from various sources, such as their peers, social media, even the influence in the pop culture that they're dealing with on a daily. Teens often hear conflicting information about substance, which can make it challenging for them to discern the risk and behaviors. Start by validating their feelings and experiences. Show that you understand the pressure they face on a daily. This approach fosters trust and openness, creating a foundation for a meaningful conversation. One effective strategy is to draw parallel lines between substance use and other risky behaviors that teens are more familiar with on a daily basis, such as not wearing your seatbelt in the car or a helmet on a motorcycle. Explain that these safety measures are crucial to prevent accidents. Involving substance is a vital safeguard for their health and future. Highlight, while some people may have these risks and seem fine, those are often the expectations that rather than the role. The reality is to engage in risky behavior, it can lead to several consequences, which can when things go wrong. And the last one, don't judge their friends. Lastly, it's crucial to avoid judging their friends. Criticizing their peer group can lead to defensiveness and complete shutdown of the conversation. Instead, offer guidance and support while respecting their choices, which can help maintain a trust and open relationship. By utilizing these strategies, you can create a supportive environment that encourages open and honest dialogue. So those are the strategies for the youth that there was top of them. I see there was a question. Let me see if I can scroll back up.
You had a question that was, where's the line, right? When we're talking about something like fentanyl and not using scare tactics, because people can literally die from using it.
I am not seeing it, Laura. That's why I'm trying to look for it.
Oh, that's okay. I just read it to you. So if we want to address that, I think, if you want me to jump in and address that question.
Yes, I'm not seeing the whole question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I saw it. It's gone now, but I did see it when it came in. And you're so right, whoever posted that. It is such a fine line. And I think that when we avoid scare tactics that are real general, drugs, or you could die, without really talking about drilling down to things that have longer term impacts and can absolutely still end in your eventual death, versus the risk of immediate and how fentanyl is showing up in everything. And then even just acknowledging that, hey, this sounds like a scare tactic. I get it. And that's not where I'm really trying to come from with this, but it's the hard reality right now that, when I talk to my teenage daughter, I say, the messaging used to be really different when I was a young person. And some of that still lingers in our social landscape. And so we think that, like, yes, you could absolutely die from substance misuse, but also, like, don't do drugs because it could mess up your life and it could have these other consequences. And now in today's world, the messaging is don't do drugs because you actually die the very first time that you made the wrong choice or experimented or made a poor choice, and you don't have that luxury in your generation. So I'm very honest with her about what sounds like a fear tactic. And then I'm very, very careful to be responsible with not using fear tactics in other places because that is so accurate. So I hope that helps a little bit with the answer to that question. I'm sorry, Savannah, I'll turn it back over.
No, thank you so much, Laura, for jumping in. Because, like I said, I couldn't see the question and then it disappeared on me. So with that, let's move on into setting the boundaries. Addressing concerns and setting boundaries, concern, consequences, and care, right? In today's world, the landscape is, sorry, wrong slide. This reality underscores the importance of having, like Laura said, that open and honest conversation about the specific risk associated with misuse. Stating those clear expectation consequences is essential not only in addressing drug use, but in overall behavior. When establishing boundaries, it's important to avoid actions that may drive a wedge between the parent and the child. Instead of focusing on the natural consequences and reinforcing the importance of honesty, for example, rather than forbidding a child from associating with a peer like Johnny, let's say, explain the natural consequences of such association, how it might limit their opportunities or shift priorities in a way that are undesirable. By fostering an environment of trust and open conversation rather than one of the fears and controls, parents can better guide their children through these complex issues. The more honest and open and understanding you bring these conversations, the more effective they will be in promoting safe and informed choices. So moving on and being prepared. All right, so we're parents here. Some of us are parents here on this. Being a prepared parent for teenagers is a multifaceted endeavor that requires a productive approach and a well-rounded toolbox. One of the most effective ways to stay informed and equipped is engaged in continuous learning. This also includes reading books, having these kind of webinars to attend, showing up to those PTO meetings at the school, workshops, school events, community events, as these events provide knowledge and foster connections with other parents and professionals who can offer support and advice. In today's digital age, being presented on social media platforms where parents' communities thrive can be an incredible visionary. Participating in forums such as this, like I said, even in hidden in plain sight. If you haven't heard of it, look it up. It's a great thing for the parents to understand what could be hiding in your kid's bedroom. It seeks advice, gains different perspective on handling various teen issues. Being active on online community helps you stay updated on current trends and challenges that teens face. Finally, building a robust sport network is essential because, as the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child. This network can include family, friends, other parents, community members, such as specific person at your kid's school or even a neighborhood. Engaging with coalitions and knowing that what resources and programs are available in your community can provide additional layers of support. By fostering these relationships and staying informed, you can create a nurturing environment that improves both you and your teen to navigate the complex of adolescence more effectively. So that is it from me.
Excellent. Before we turn it back over to Kathleen, thank you so much, Savannah. I appreciate you. I want to address, there was one more question that came in while you were talking from Dr. Dooley, who said one of the main concerns, where's the nuclear families in these youth's lives? I've practiced for 30 plus years. This seems to be a big part of many issues. And I just wanted to address that for a second. And I think a lot of these strategies do operate under the assumption that the landscape of what families look like has really drastically years. And what was a social norm, maybe 30 years ago isn't really a social norm now. And that comes with all kinds of differences, all kinds of impacts. And some of them are going to be bad, some are going to be neutral, some are going to be good, right? And so strategies like identifying partners, learning resources, that helps, I think, really help fill those gaps, because one of the research and the science has shown us that, at one time, being in a single parent household, as an example, was a huge risk. And then as it became more of the social norm, and as we figured out ways to make sure there weren't mentoring holes in those kids' lives, or relationships with caring adult professionals, it sort of filled those gaps. And now that, combined with it being more of a social norm, does make it less of a risk factor. So that's the good news. But it's still something we have to address. It's still something we have to make sure we're putting a robust support system in place for a lot of these kids who, you're absolutely right, don't have that sort of traditional nuclear family that was more common in some previous generations. So hope that helps a little bit. Kathleen, we're going to go ahead and put that back over to you. Savannah, you're going to have to do that. If you just click the three, or did you?
I already got it.
Perfect. All right.
I grabbed it. So perfect. Well, thank you both to Laura and Savannah. We really much appreciate the information you've shared here of some of the practical recommendations, tips, things to look out for. And so we want to give you even more practical pieces of this. So I'm going to turn this part over to Nancy from our team. She is in charge of programs and outreach, and she's going to talk a little bit about some examples of what we see when we're talking about youth engagement. So Nancy, with that, I will turn it to you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you everyone for staying. We're going to be wrapping up, but before we wrapped up, I wanted to share how we engage our youth in our region and how our members are able to carry some of the community level changes where we could see population change. And for us as coalitions, we do environmental strategies. And the example I like to give is click it or ticket. Anywhere you go in the US, everyone knows what click it or ticket. So if we go to the next slide, Kathleen, I'll share more in depth about the 7 strategies for community level change. So these strategies include efforts that affect individuals and the entire community. And so I want to talk about how you include the young people in those steps. So when we look at number 1 in providing information about substance use, peer-to-peer education is very powerful. Having them being involved to organize, to do educational presentations, to do workshops, to do seminars, to share some of the data and the media presentations. We heard earlier that they're very social, they're very visual in that aspect. In addition, having them do public service announcements. They are influenced, as we learned in Kathleen's presentations, by others. And so it's also important to include them in town halls, forums, web communication, and again, social media. When we look at building skills, we need to provide opportunities that youth can build positive social skills and also enhance their decision-making capabilities. You can do this through a variety of activities, such as workshops, seminars, retreats. Also, having activities to increase those skills and providing technical assistance. And if we give them the guidance, if we give them the training, their voices are so powerful. And it's important because people want to hear from them. So when we move on to providing support, number 3, we want to increase those opportunities that reduce the risk factors. We always want to reduce risk factors and increase protective factors. We also want to provide opportunities for participation in the activities, regardless of where they are from, what race they are. We also want to include alternative activities. So mentoring, again, peer-to-peer education is powerful. Peer-to-peer tutoring is also very helpful. Having support groups amongst themselves is also very impactful. And then youth clubs. A lot of our coalition members do have a variety of different youth clubs. And then when we move on to number 4, enhancing access, reducing barriers, and improving connections between systems and services that help prevent substance use. And so again, we have to allow them to be a voice in helping us improve our systems and also the process to increase the access and ability and opportunity to use them. So these might include, transportation, housing, education, safety, recreational facilities. Again, things that they need access to, things that they're involved with. But also we need to be culturally sensitive when we do these initiatives. I want to encourage you getting youth involved and having them be a voice in the planning, in the execution, and also in the community meetings is very, very powerful. So let's move on to number 5. And so number 5 is changing those consequences. So we want to incentivize. There's always a lot of negativity, so we want to recognize those positive practices and those behaviors. And so again, involving them in how do we recognize each other, how they can recognize their peers and individuals around them. And then changing the physical design. We see a lot of our coalitions take youth on park cleanups. And it's interesting to see that when they go to those park cleanups, yes, they're picking up debris, but many times it gives you a picture and landscape of what is being used in your community. So when we've done it in Marion County, we've seen a lot of vapes, we've seen needles. And so it's an opportunity to educate them also on what's going on. And so sometimes changing the physical design is maybe having just more trash cans or having safe disposal containers, having more lighting, or maybe having some more cameras. But again, involving them in that planning. And then the last one, educating and informing about the policies that reduce access and availability to substances among youth. And so we do Advocacy Day. We encourage our youth to go also with us to Advocacy Day because our legislators want to hear about them. They want their perspectives. So include them whenever you have the opportunity. And so now I'm going to pass it on to Elizabeth Nettles. She's going to share a great resource tip sheet that we have for you guys.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm going to move it over to Elizabeth so you can drive. And I hope this information has been really helpful. We wanted to now also give a takeaway for you all. And Elizabeth's going to share on the screen the tip sheets that we have so that it's not just what you hear today, but you have a takeaway with you. Elizabeth.
Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Elizabeth Nettles. So we wanted to create this tool for you guys. I know we've had a lot talked about the last 2 hours, but we want something that you can take to different outreach events or take to the schools you're in or take to really whoever posted on your social media to take the information that you learned today and really apply it in your community. So essentially, we created this 5-page tip sheet with everything we talked about today. So this first page really goes over the definitions of the generations of the youth that we're working with today. This second page gives actually a snapshot of the data Kathleen talked about. So even if you're talking to someone who doesn't love the data, these visuals help kind of bring that story to life. And it goes over the brain pieces that we touched on and also the social experience that our youth are going through. On this third page, we talk about the communication tips and really what Laura and Savannah dug into about how to talk to our youth and their slang terms, which are always so much fun to learn, in my opinion. And then on this fourth page, we talk about their communication style, the boundary setting, and really how to be prepared as a parent and really an educator these days. And then this last page, we go over the communities of change that Nancy talked about just now. So this is a really cool tool. We want you guys to have this. We want you guys to use this anywhere you go. And we hope it will help you with all of the work that you guys are doing.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We appreciate that. And we hope that you all have learned some great things here today with the various presenters that we had. We wanted to give you a variety of different perspectives. And really the takeaways is that there's a lot of positive with this young generation, whether we're talking about Gen Z or Generation Alpha. Yes, there's some challenges. Yes, there's some struggles. But these are groups of individuals that are very socially motivated. They're conscious about their environment around them. Whether it's the physical environment, the environment of their peers, being able to be bring in that equality components. So much great greatness and potential is here. We just need to figure out how do we engage them better, knowing what they're bringing to the table, knowing what they've gone through, and being able to move with them so we can make sure that we're equipping them for the best that they could have available for them in their future. So with that, we conclude our presentation. And Robert, I will turn this back over to you. Thank you again for this opportunity from Florida Alcohol and Drug Abuse Association and the Department of Children and Families. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry, everyone. I just realized that I was on mute. My apologies. So, thank you, Kathleen and Laura, Nancy, Savannah, and Elizabeth, for your time and dedication to this presentation today. Sincerely appreciate it. Everyone hang on for just a moment for a couple of conclusion business items. I did post the resource in the chat as well. If you did not receive it, I'll post it again. You can also find it on our website under past events. But I want to thank everybody from Community Coalition Alliance for their time and dedication to this presentation. I'm also posting a link to the evaluation in the chat. If you would go ahead, click on that, get directed to the evaluation, you can go ahead and take that. Additionally, when I close out of the webinar here in just a moment, your web browser will populate a message that says the host or presenter would like WebEx meetings to open a website on your computer. This is not spam. This is WebEx trying to redirect you to the evaluation. So click continue to be automatically redirected. You must sign into your account to complete the evaluation. If this is your first webinar with us, you can register for an account at no cost. You can do so by clicking haven't registered yet. Please use the same email address that you used when you registered for today's webinar when you set up your profile in our system. So if you use a work email address to register for today's webinar, please use that same work email address to register for your FATAD account. This is the only way we are able to connect your attendance to your profile. For CEs to be reported to CE Broker for Florida licensed healthcare practitioners, you must provide an accurate Florida Department of Health license prefix and number the first time you register. If you need to add or update your license number, you may do so by logging in and clicking Edit on the Professional Information section of your profile. You'll get a third opportunity to complete the evaluation through a follow-up email later today. Please note that the evaluation will close at the end of the day on Tuesday, July 2nd, 2024. For assistance with account login, account registration, or evaluation completion, please fill out a contact us form at the top of the FATA website. We do not email statements of credit. Instead, after we verify your attendance and completion of the evaluation, a statement of credit will be posted to the professional development section of your profile in your FATA account within 30 business days. You must have attended the entire webinar and completed the evaluation for a statement of completion. We are not permitted to provide partial credit. As a reminder, the recording and materials used in today's presentation will be available on the FATA website within 30 business days. To access the recording in PowerPoint, visit www.fata.org, navigate to the Resource Center, and click on Training Library as shown on the screen. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. Thank you again to everyone at Community Coalition Alliance for their time. We'd also like to recognize and thank the Florida Department of Children and Families for funding today's education. Have a great day, and everyone please hold for the evaluation.